Hey nerdy knitters, in this video we're going to look at the I-cord tab cast on using a provisional or Turkish cast on. Now you use an I-cord tab along a shawl edge, like a top-down triangle shawl, like this one. This is an I-cord edge. It's a good alternative to a garter tab cast on, where you have a garter stitch edge. Instead, you could replace it with an I-cord edge. I'll show you exactly how to work this and how you can use it to replace a garter stitch edge if the shawl that you're knitting requires that. You can easily swap it out if you prefer an I-cord edge. But before we do that, I just want to say, hey, I'm Tanya. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a knitwear designer, and I'm here to help you become a confident, adventurous knitter. You'll find the instructions that we're working through in our demonstration down in the video description box, along with some timestamp links if you want to jump to any point in the video. So let's work that I-cord tab cast on. This is a garter tab cast on, right here. And you keep that garter stitch edge. And if you want to replace that, you can work an I-cord edge instead. Now first off, what is a tab cast on? That is simply something that fills in the top of a top-down triangle shawl or a crescent shawl, any shawl where you start in the middle and you work out in both directions. You can see I didn't work any sort of tab here, and it leaves this open empty spot, which is fine, but I think it just looks a lot nicer if you fill that space in. Like I did here, I used a garter tab cast on. It fills in that empty spot. And if we don't want a garter tab, we can replace it and we create an I-cord tab instead, which is what we're going to do today. To hold our provisional cast on, we're going to use the cable cord on a circular needle. You could use waste yarn if you want, but I just prefer to use an extra needle because it makes it very simple. To start, you start by putting a slip knot on that spare needle. Okay, so we have our slip knot on that spare needle, and the needle we're going to use for our tab cast on goes right below it. Now if you want to skip the provisional cast on, you can use a backwards loop cast on, even a long tail, whatever you want, and you'll just pick up stitches from that edge instead. But I just prefer to use this. I find it pretty simple to work. So we have our two needles here. We take our working yarn and we're going to start from the bottom and bring it up and over. I'm going to do a 3-stitch edge, so I'm going to wrap it 3 times, not counting that slip knot on the edge. And then we turn our work, holding that yarn in place so we don't lose it. And that bottom needle, that spare needle, is going to hold those stitches right there. That's our provisional edge. We'll just slide them back up on the needle when we want them later on. Now we're going to knit 6 rows. So this first row is a bit finicky. You want to hold that yarn so you don't lose what's going on this provisional edge. You're just going to knit those 3 stitches. And then what you can do, I'm using double pointed needles, so I can just slide them right across. We're going to work an I-cord, which means we don't even turn our work. We're going to knit them again. This is number 2. Don't have double pointed needles or you don't want to slide them across, what you will do is slip them back to your other needle. Just like this. We're not going to turn our work and work back and forth in rows. That would be garter stitch. We want to work an I-cord. This is row 3. Slip them back or slide them to the end if you're using a circular needle. And our last I-cord row, number 6. So that is an I-cord. If you turn it, it looks like knitting all around. It makes just this little cord of knit stitches. We didn't turn our work, we just slid the stitches across, and pulling that yarn across pulls those 3 stitches closed. Now I've done 6 rows. 5 rows give us our tab. They give us this space right here that's going to fill in our shawl. The 6th row is actually the start of our pattern. Now we're going to pick up the stitches we need here and get what we need to start a shawl. So we've done that. This is the first edge. This is the 3-stitch edge that will go in one direction. Now we need to pick up 3 stitches along the body of the shawl. So what you do is you turn your work and look for where that stitch is coming out, right there. This is the row we want to work right here. You can see all of this row of V's underneath, right there. We're going to pick up 3 stitches right here. You can use one leg or two. I prefer to use two for a sturdy cast on edge. Our stitch is coming out of this one, so we're going to skip that and we'll go to the one underneath it. We insert into both legs, or just one if you prefer, and pick up a stitch. And then look for the next stitch underneath there. Just look at the legs of the stitch. See, we have a V right there. We're just going to work into it. 2 and 3 right there. And there's one here that we'll just skip. You can, that's where this I-cord is forgiving. You can work an extra row or two and it just gives your I-cord tab a little more space. So there's our 3 for our I-cord edge along here. 3 stitches that we'll use to work our body. And now we need to pick up our stitches here. But this is also the first row of our shawl. And we have specific instructions, I'm going to put them right here on the screen, that show you how you're going to maintain that I-cord pattern while you're working your shawl. You're going to knit 3 stitches, you're going to work the body of your shawl, and then on the last 3 stitches you're going to bring the yarn to the front and slip those stitches purlwise. So we want to start that right away. So we've knit our first 3, we did our body stitches, and now we want to slip these purlwise. But right now they present as knit stitches. We want the purl side of this. So what we want to do is flip this around. So we get our purl stitches. And then this is what's nice about a circular needle. We just slide it up here, right onto our needle. Get that tail out of the way. We need to bring our yarn to the front. And now we have these purl stitches. This first one is sort of twisted because of the cast on we used. It's not a big deal, but you're just going to slide it over, slide 2, slide 3. We're going to drop the slip knot right off the needle. It's not going to go anywhere. All those stitches are locked in. And we slid them on, and then we have our yarn there. And then we can turn our work. We're done with the cable needle. We can get that out of the way. And we're ready to start the wrong side row of our shawl, or the next row, whatever the next row is, maintaining that pattern. See, we slipped those stitches, and we know for our I-cord pattern to maintain the edge, the instructions are right here. We knit the first 3 stitches. You can pull that yarn a bit tight if you want, so that closes up the gap where we slipped those stitches, and we have that yarn back there. There's that twisted stitch. If you wanted to, you could move it so it's not twisted, but I'm just going to work it like a regular stitch. Nobody's going to notice that. Then we work the body of our shawl. I'm on a purl row for this if I wanted to work in stockinette, so I would purl across. And then we get to our last 3 stitches, and we want to maintain our I-cord edge, so that was knit the first 3 stitches, bring the yarn to the front, and slip them purlwise. You're going to do that on every row of your shawl if you want to work an I-cord edge. You'll knit the first 3, and then slip those purlwise. And that's all there is to working that tab. You can see if we were to put it there, it would fill in that spot right there, and we'd have our stitches working out in both directions, and we would be ready to work the body of our shawl. Now it's easy to adjust this I-cord tab cast on. If you're working extra stitches in the body of your shawl, you want to cast on extra things for a cable or a lace panel in the middle, you can adjust this tab cast on to allow for those extra cast on stitches. But before we get to that, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions or comments about this technique, be sure to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So how would you adjust this first of all? First off, you would decide the edge stitches. I wanted a 3-stitch I-cord edge, so that's what we cast on. If you wanted a 4 or 5-stitch I-cord edge, you would cast on that amount of stitches. And then you work the number of rows that you need to pick up stitches for. So if you need to pick up 3 stitches for the body of your shawl, you want to knit 3 rows plus 2 more to give you some space to move. As you noticed in our demonstration, that the row we pick up, we can't pick up a stitch in that row underneath since we worked a stitch into it already. So that extra row or 2 gives us some room for things like that. and then you're ready to start your shawl. And then whenever you want to work your I-cord edging, you knit your first 3 stitches, work the body of the shawl, whatever's happening there, and then you bring the yarn to the front and slip the last 3 purlwise. You'll do that on every row, no matter what's happening on the body of the shawl. You maintain that pattern along the edge and you have an I-cord edge. So if you want to use the I-cord tab cast on to replace a garter tab cast on, you can easily do that. If a shawl pattern tells you to cast on 3 stitches, you could keep that the same amount for your I-cord edge, and then it will tell you how many stitches you're going to need to pick up. So use that amount as the rows you need to work instead of whatever rows they recommend in garter stitch. You would look at how many stitches you're going to have to pick up for the shawl body and add 1 or 2 to that and work that number of rows of I-cord before picking up your stitches along the edge and picking up the stitches along the other side of your cast on edge for the full amount that you need for your shawl. It's really that simple. Now if you want to learn more about the garter tab cast on, check out the video I've linked here. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to share it with your friends that love to knit, and if you like to get nerdy with your knitting, be sure to subscribe.